You are watching programming from the East-West Center in Washington, D.C.
Good morning from Washington, D.C., from the East-West Center. My name is Sathu Lim. I'm the Vice President of the East-West Center and the Director of the East-West Center in Washington. Welcome to this program on U.S. and Thailand perspectives on the geostrategic landscape and regional architecture in the Indo-Pacific. This is the first in a series of webinars in a cooperative effort between the East-West Center, the Royal Embassy of Thailand in Washington, D.C., the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the International Studies Center. We're delighted to have a distinguished group of U.S. senators, Thai foreign policy officials, and experts with us this morning. And good evening to all of those who are joining us from Bangkok, where I know it is at the end of your day, and I'm very grateful. It is my pleasure to turn over the initial proceedings to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Thailand in the United States, Ambassador Manasvi, a distinguished diplomat in his country's foreign service and an important voice here on Thailand and Southeast Asia in Washington. Welcome, Ambassador Manasvi. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sathu Lim. On behalf of Team Thailand in Washington, allow me to extend warm greetings to all participants who are joining us from America and Thailand. Sawadee krap. I also wish to extend our special thanks to Dr. Sathu, Vice President of the East-West Center in Washington, for co-organizing the webinar series together with my hardworking colleagues at the Embassy. Special thanks also to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the International Studies Center in Thailand for your active support and collaboration. I am immensely grateful to today's eminent speakers and panelists, the Honorable Senator from Illinois, Senator Tammy Duckworth, His Excellency Ambassador Wichawat Israpakdi, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, and my good friends, the Honorable Cory Gardner, former Senator from Colorado, Alex Feldman, President and CEO of the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, and Dr. Dam Sukontasap, Director of the Institute of Diplomacy and International Studies in Thailand. Thank you for kindly sparing your time to share wisdom and thoughts on ways to further strengthen U.S.-Thai relations. Indeed, this is the main purpose of the exercise, is to stimulate discussions and collaboration between the thinkers and practitioners of our two nations on how we can further develop a strategic and practical affirmative agenda to further advance our almost 200 years of partnership and long-standing alliance, in order to create new opportunities and tackle common challenges for the benefit of our people. Let me say that I'm very encouraged with the vision laid out by President Biden to build back better for America and for the world, as well as the policies that have been rolling out over the past 6 months of the new administration. I sincerely believe that we can identify areas where the policies and programs of our two governments can complement one another. For instance, on the U.S. administration's policy to recalibrate U.S. global supply chains, Thailand, through the Eastern Economic Corridor and other economic zones and facilities, can help in the research and production of vaccines, medical equipments, microchip and semiconductors, and use readily available raw materials such as natural rubber to produce parts and components for defense and military equipment. On the creation of climate-resilient economy, we can explore how the Thai government bio-circular green economy agenda and its application can serve as a catalyst for meeting a more ambitious climate action and protect the environment. The Thai government's goal to increase electric vehicle production and the use of alternative and renewed energy offers good prospects for cooperation. On digital transformation, there is wide room to cooperate in the creation of smart cities in Thailand using U.S. technology and experience, similar to the ongoing pilot project taking place in Ban Chang. U.S. policy to enhance cybersecurity would also serve as an important building block for a more secure and safer cyberspace. on the U.S. government's renewed enthusiasm to engage with its allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific, there is very good opportunity for the U.S. and Thailand to work together bilaterally and in various regional and sub-regional fora, such as APEC, ASEAN, and the Mekong, to help shape the region's economic recovery and develop legal and normative frameworks to support the evolving regional architecture. Over the past 6 months since the coming into office, we have witnessed a flurry of phone calls, webinars, and visits by the high officials of the new administration to their counterpart in Thailand and elsewhere in Asia. I hope that this can be complemented at the legislative level as well as the business and people's level. Indeed, in my discussions with various congressmen and senators, with the U.S. business circles, and at the local level, I can sense a strong desire to do so once Thailand is on the road to recovery from the COVID pandemic. As I invite all participants to ponder about what can serve as practical inputs and ideas to develop an affirmative agenda for the U.S.-Thai relations, I have the honor and pleasure to introduce our two prominent guest speakers who care deeply about the long-standing Thai-U.S. alliance. First, Ambassador Vichawat Isarapakdi, who I have been acquainted with since my school days at Romrodi International School. Not only was he an avid soccer player, but since then he has gained extensive expertise and experience in Thai-U.S. relations. He is a Fulbright scholar, a congressional fellow serving Senator Hank Brown from Colorado and Congressman Dan Rohrabacher from California. He has served twice with distinction at the Thai Embassy in Washington, most recently as ambassador. Our next speaker, the Honorable Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, hardly needs any words of introduction. She is a well-known war veteran who retired with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel and has since been very active and dedicated to public service, serving 2 times as a member of the House of Representatives and since 2017 as a member of the U.S. Senate. As a U.S. citizen born in Thailand, she spent her childhood years in Southeast Asia and knows the region very well. ASEAN is most fortunate that she is seated in the helms of power in Washington. She is currently serving as the vice chair of the Democrat National Committee, for which she meets regularly with the President of the United States. She is also a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and has served as former co-chair of the Friends of Thailand caucus. She keeps Southeast Asia close to her heart and continues to play an important role in mobilizing U.S. vaccine support to countries in Southeast Asia. She continues to serve as an inspiration to everyone in Thailand, America, and in ASEAN. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. Shall we go straight to the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand for his opening remarks, please, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sathu. Honorable Senator Tammy Duckworth, Honorable Senator Cory Gardner, Ambassador Manatsawi Srisodapon, Mr. Alexander Feldman, President and CEO of the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, Dr. Dam Sukontasap, co-founder and director of the Institute of Diplomacy and International Studies, Rangsit University, Dr. Sathu, Vice President of the East-West Center, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Sawadee krap and good evening from Bangkok. Due to the time difference, I was going to brag that I have already put in a whole day's work while you folks in Washington have just woken up. But I suspect that the honorable senators have already accomplished more during their brief waking hours than I have managed all day. So I will just hold my tongue. Anyhow, it is my great pleasure to join the very first session of this timely webinar series on the US and Thailand perspectives on the geostrategic landscape and regional architecture. The panel has not started yet, but I can tell that it will be stimulating and thought-provoking, judging from the distinguished group of speakers we have for this inaugural session. I am very honored to have joining us today Senator Duckworth and former Senator Gardner, not to mention Alex Feltman, all longtime friends of Thailand. Dr. Dam, of course, is an old personal friend who, like Ambassador Manatsawi, knows most of my secrets. It's wonderful to see you all again. I would like to applaud the East-West Center and the Royal Thai Embassy for their collaboration to launch this webinar series, which is taking place at a very appropriate juncture, given the recent change of the U.S. administration earlier this year, amidst the evolving regional strategic landscape and unprecedented challenges, particularly the global COVID-19 pandemic. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Thailand and the US have been great and good friends, in the words of many former US presidents, for almost 2 centuries now, even more if one includes our initial contact. Our long-standing alliance and strategic partnership dating back to 1833 have not only benefited both countries and peoples, but have also made a lasting contribution to peace, stability, and prosperity in Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific region. Over the years, our bilateral relations have continually been marked by positive dynamics in all areas. The recent official visit of US Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman to Thailand in early June reaffirmed our close alliance based on shared values and mutual interests. Security and defense cooperation remains the cornerstone of our enduring relationship and has been expanded to address modern-day security challenges. At the same time, our economic cooperation is just as essential, if not more. I trust that Thailand has proven to be a reliable partner in the US supply chain network, with trade between Thailand and the United States largely uninterrupted despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Throughout the outbreak, US production facilities in Thailand have remained operational and mostly unaffected. In terms of investments, the United States has been one of our longtime largest foreign investors, while Thailand's outbound investments to the US have substantially increased to more than $10 billion at present. These are excellent examples of what can be achieved when our 2 countries work closely together. However, we cannot simply rest on our laurels. Amidst the numerous global and regional challenges that we are facing, it is now more necessary than ever that we join hands to reinvigorate the Thailand-US partnership to better respond to our common challenges of the present day, whether they be global pandemics, economic stagnation, environmental degradation, climate crisis, or cyber and transnational crime, to name just a few. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, against all the current and future challenges, Thailand and the United States should and must continue to work on our shared values and converging interests, of which there are many. We also need to redouble our efforts to build back better and stronger. As the pandemic has shown us, in this intrinsically interdependent world, no one is safe until everyone is safe. Subsequently, for our alliance to bear tangible outcomes and better respond to the challenges that lie ahead, I wish to put forth some thoughts before today's deliberations. First, addressing the COVID-19 pandemic will naturally remain our top priority for the foreseeable future, both in terms of disease control and economic recovery. Thailand and the United States should, therefore, strengthen our cooperation on COVID-19 preparedness and response. Public health cooperation has been an integral part of our bilateral cooperation for more than 60 years. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the United States has continued to provide assistance and support to Thailand, highlighted by the recently announced donation of 1.5 million doses of vaccines, for which we are greatly appreciative. Looking ahead, Thailand and the United States should further strengthen our partnership on health security and may even expand it to benefit other countries in the Mekong sub-region. Second, and equally important, we must carefully consider the challenges and maximize the opportunities of the post-COVID-19 world in addressing our economic priorities for fast and full recovery. Thailand welcomes President Biden's policy on America's supply chains and agrees that resilient, diverse, and secure supply chains are crucial to economic prosperity and national security. Accordingly, as Thailand has long been a stronghold of U.S. businesses in the region, we are very keen to work with the United States to further strengthen our supply chains. Thailand is fully committed and will continue to nurture and enhance an environment conducive to trade and investment as an engine for global economic recovery. Third, for post-COVID recovery and sustainable growth, Thailand has prioritized the Biocircular Green or BCG economy model as our national agenda to transform Thailand into a value-based and innovation-led economy while ensuring sustainability. This is much in line with the Biden administration's agenda on the climate crisis and the environment. So this is another area where we can enhance our collaboration. Fourth, human security forms another fundamental part of sustainability. One critical task in the immediate term is to mitigate the negative impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic and ensure the well-being of our peoples. In this regard, Thailand shares a common aspiration with the United States in promoting human security in all aspects, especially among vulnerable groups such as women, children, people with disabilities, and migrant workers, as well as combating all forms of human trafficking and people smuggling. Human security includes cooperation on human capital development with a view to promoting inclusive and sustainable development. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, turning now to the bigger picture of the regional landscape, both Thailand and the United States have long shared the same commitment to promote peace, security, and prosperity in the region. During these times when we are all facing common challenges of an unprecedented global pandemic, economic slowdown, and climate crises, to name but a few, a peaceful and stable regional environment that will contribute to socio-economic recovery, balanced growth, and sustainable development must be what we strive to achieve. For many decades, the United States' active role in the region has been an important driving force for peace and prosperity. We welcome the Biden administration's emphasis on re-engaging with allies and partners, including those in the Indo-Pacific, to collectively address common global challenges. The ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, or AOIP, serves as ASEAN's vista on how to promote regional stability and prosperity based on the ASEAN-centered regional architecture. For us, AOIP is key to guiding action towards strengthening win-win cooperation in the region. Given the changing geopolitical landscape in the region at large, the Mekong sub-region has become increasingly significant in strategic terms and has drawn greater attention from many key players. With our long-standing partnership and with our values and priorities aligned in so many areas, Thailand welcomes the United States' proactive and constructive engagement in the region and the sub-region. In particular, the United States is encouraged to consider increasing its role in development assistance in a way that responds to the development agenda and concretely contributes to the better livelihood of the people. Thailand stands ready to be the United States partner in this regard, to promote a balanced environment for peace and prosperity, our common goals for the region and sub-region. By and large, the US might consider fully utilizing the existing cooperation frameworks such as ASEAN, ACMEX, and the Mekong-US partnership, as well as US financial mechanisms such as the US International Development Finance Corporation, to help increase its engagement and technical assistance for sustainable growth and development. We also look forward to be learning more about the United States' latest global infrastructure initiative, Build Back Better World, and seeing its concrete progress. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Thailand takes pride in our long-standing alliance and partnership with the US. Looking ahead, we are committed to ensuring that our partnership better responds to our common challenges and better serves our common interests, not only for the benefit of our countries and peoples, but also for the region and sub-region at large. Before closing, I would like to thank the East-West Center and the Royal Thai Embassy in Washington once again for their excellent initiative in co-hosting this webinar. I would also like to offer my sincere thanks to all the distinguished panelists today, ahead of what is sure to be an intriguing discussion. I am confident that this webinar will generate new ideas on how, together, we can advance our multifaceted collaboration and reinvigorate our long-standing ties in response to both the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. I wish this webinar every success. I thank you.
Thank you, Vice Minister, for those inspiring remarks and also extremely thought-generating agenda for our consideration. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Senator Tammy Duckworth. Welcome, Senator, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, it's good to be here, Dr. Lim. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to speak, albeit virtually, and I look forward to being in person myself as well. As some of you may know, and it's been mentioned, I am an American, but my Thai heritage makes me a living example between the bond between our two nations. And after all, our nations have a long, long history of friendship. And for centuries now, our countries have learned from and leaned on each other militarily, diplomatically, economically, culturally. From law enforcement to education, national security to our respective economies, we've helped one another grow and evolve, adapting to a world that is increasingly more connected, adapting to an era in which technology allows allies half a world away to be there for each other in half an instant, which is why I include legislation in last year's NDAA that included cybersecurity cooperation between Thailand and the United States. You know, there's a reason that Thailand is often called Washington's oldest ally in Asia. Ever since an American ship landed there more than 200 years ago, ever since His Majesty King Mongkut offered to send elephants to President Abraham Lincoln from my home state of Illinois, an ocean away, ever since we agreed to help strengthen one another's economies with the Treaty of Amity and Commerce and help bolster each other's defenses with the Manila Pact, our two nations have proven that there's no greater asset than a partner you can count on in both times of peace and conflict. Recently, Thailand has let America refuel our aircraft at Utapao during the thick of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. Some of Thailand's military officers train in the United States, including in my own aviation branch home base of Fort Rucker, Alabama. Every year, our two militaries join together to take part in Cobra Gold, the largest multilateral exercise in the region. And time after time, Thailand and the United States work side by side to catch the bad guys running international criminal networks, to give humanitarian relief to those who need it, to keep the peace far beyond our own borders, and to help curb health crises by sharing vaccines, well aware that pandemics don't recognize nations' borders, and if a public health emergency exists in one region, no other region is safe. And I know our recent announcement is that We'll be sending no less than 1.5 million doses of the COVID vaccine. In fact, the goal is 2.5 million, but the first shipment will be 1.5. Now, with more and more geopolitical threats rising by the day, the strength of our bond is as important as ever. You know, here on this webinar, as well as I do, that Thailand sits right in the middle of some of the gravest security challenges of our time. Our alliance provides some sense of stability amidst that chaos, some sense of security amidst the unpredictability. From the economy to cyber warfare to maritime security, the United States counts on Thailand to be our partner, working together to ensure the region's safety and prosperity, to ensure that all of the countries in the region are free to trade and travel the high seas, to ensure that all parties adhere to the international rule of law. And as the United States said at the last Shangri-La dialogue that actually happened, and I was there a couple of years ago, and I quote, "Perhaps the greatest long-term threat to the interests of states across this region comes from actors who seek to undermine rather than uphold the rules-based order, trying to exploit others economically and diplomatically and coerce them militarily. These actors destabilize the region towards their own exclusive advantage, and America will not support that. We must stay vigilant against such threats, refusing to ignore any erosion of rights, because we've seen what happens when we close our eyes to the wrongs before us. When our commitment to international rule is anything but resolute, economies around the world falter. When norms and principles are breached, alliances fissure. Prosperity and security are threatened, instability reigns. And there's no easy fix, no simple way to backtrack. That's just one reason why I'm so grateful for the ongoing bond between the United States and Thailand. And it's just one reason why I'm so thankful to call you all my partners in this work, striving to keep not only our countries, but the world at large more peaceful and more prosperous for every family, from Bangkok to Chicago, Bogota to Cairo. Thank you so much, Khop Khun Mak Naka, and have a wonderful webinar. Thank you. Sawadee.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth, and thank you so much for your leadership, not only on U.S.-Thai relations, but on U.S. Indo-Pacific relations. You were so gracious to offer a bunch of ASEAN matters last week and again here today. So thank you for your leadership in the Senate and your continuing work on Indo-Pacific relations. It's really a great gift to both countries and the region and the world. Thank you. We now turn to a panel discussion of three very distinguished colleagues who will make each some initial prepared remarks. We have with us Dr. Dharm Sukantha from Rangsit University, where he directs the Institute of Diplomacy and International Studies, is an acknowledged leader and thinker on ASEAN and has been involved in advising the royal government of Thailand. We also have with us former Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado, himself a distinguished contributor to a range of initiatives on U.S. Indo-Pacific relations, including the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, amongst many, many other contributions. And we are grateful, Senator Gardner, for your presence here today. And we have my colleague and collaborator on the ASEAN Matters for America project from the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, Mr. Alex Feldman, who is very actively engaged in promoting commercial ties between the United States and the region, and of course, within that context, the U.S.-Thailand commercial relationship. So welcome to all of you. May I invite you, given time is short, to please make some initial opening remarks, and then we'll go into a panel discussion inviting questions and comments from the floor. First, over to you, Dr. Sukantha, please.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sathu Lim. Good morning, Your Excellency, Dr. Vichawat Itsrapakdi, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency, Ambassador Manatsawi Sodapon, Ambassador of Thailand to the U.S., Honorable Senator Tammy Duckworth, Honorable Senator Cory Gardner, Mr. Alex Feldman, and of course, Dr. Sathu Lim, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for giving me the honor to speak before you today on the topic of new opportunities for the U.S.-Thailand alliance in the Indo-Pacific. My special thanks again go to the Royal Thai Embassy in Washington and the East-West Center for jointly organizing this event. For some of you here, you may know a bit about me. I have served in the government, and for the past 20 years or so, I've been working in the private sector as well as in academic. What not that many people know is that I actually grew up in the environment of the U.S. Thailand alliance. And to some extent, like Senator Tammy Duckworth, I am a living proof of how well such alliance can work, not only for the benefit of our two countries and peoples, but also for the Southeast Asia region as a whole. I was born in a Thai military air base and later grew up in another at a time when my father served as the regional commander of air bases in the eastern and northern regions of the country. I vividly remember the height of the wars in Indochina. I remember never having seen such modern and sometimes gigantic airplanes before in my life. There were lots of them. I also remember as a 14-year-old standing on the hilltop with my father, watching C-130s bringing back battalions of Thai soldiers returning from Vietnam. In my family, we have two recipients of the Legion of Merit medals. One was my father for his role in the alliance, and the other one, many years later, my elder sister, who was a lieutenant general in the Thai Armed Forces. As for me, by chance, like Dr. Vichawat, I became a Fulbright scholar and a John E. Purifoy scholar. The latter was a Thai scholarship named after the former U.S. ambassador of Thailand, who died in a car accident while on his way to Hua Hin in the 1950s. Because of such lifelong experiences, I'm not only a believer in a strong U.S.-Thailand alliance, I also know that it works, as I and my family are a living proof of it. Thus, it is my belief that for the benefit of our two countries and peoples, we must do all we can to ensure that the alliance continue to work. Otherwise, when we speak about the 200 plus years of US-Thai friendship, we're only talking about nostalgic memories. This is why I'm quite pleased that we are discussing about new opportunities in US-Thailand alliance today. The word new in particular suggests that all of us should be forward-looking rather than to dwell on the past or even putting too much emphasis on how things are today. As I have to confess, I do not subscribe to the idea of those who tend to look at the US-Thailand alliance exclusively from the security and military perspective. An alliance can be strategic even if we include other agendas, which are non-military and non-political as outlined by Dr. Vichawat. I have seen articles and papers written about the US-Thai strategic alliance, arguing that the security perceptions of the two countries are now very different, the threat perceptions are different, and the democratic and social values are different. These papers continue to assert that, therefore, let's be realistic and not expect too much from the US-Thailand alliance. To me, this assertion is not only untrue, but also too narrow and too simplistic an interpretation. An alliance is about joint visions and goals. The strategic part is the how. It comes in only to ensure that such visions and goals become a reality. I do not believe that the visions and the goals that the US and Thailand have for themselves as nations and for Southeast Asia region are that far apart. In fact, I believe the visions and goals that the two countries have are very similar. The same goes for their visions and goals for Southeast Asia. Peace, prosperity, well-being for the people, respect for democratic principles, human rights, gender equality, environment conservation, and others are our shared visions and goals. These are the things that we both want to see in Thailand and in Southeast Asia in the years to come. It is a journey from where we are today and where we want to be or aspire to become. If our two countries can agree on this point, then we can start to discuss the how or the strategy to make things happen. The how would also tell us what needs to be fixed before we can move forward at full speed. Off the cuff, I am sure all of us can name a few areas that we believe need to be fixed. One may ask whether we in Thailand have any concerns about the situation in our country and in the region. The answer would be an unequivocal yes. We do have many concerns. At least personally, I am concerned about the direction of political, democratic, economic, and social development in my country. I am concerned about the widening income disparity among the Thai people. I'm concerned about the issues of what seems to be systematic illegal migration into the country. I'm concerned about the increasing political and military tensions in the region, especially in the South China Sea. And I am concerned about the environment and climate change in the Mekong region, and the list goes on. All of these concerns need to be addressed and dealt with, but I don't see them as the things that undermine the U.S. Thailand alliance. I see them as hurdles that we need to overcome together in order to get to be where we want to be. But in discussing the how, there needs to be some ground rules. Although the term alliance does not imply equality, it does require mutual trust and respect. No two countries are the same as far as history, culture, and experiences are concerned. We respect and admire the US for its democratic principles. In fact, we were one of the countries who directly benefited from it right after the Second World War. However, to be more truthful, Thailand can never be completely like the US, and we never have the intention to. This is why there is some resentment when we feel that we are being judged or measured by US standards. While we are fully aware that such standards are not being equally applied at all times to all friends of the US, even in Southeast Asia. Now, the question remains, how do we fix what needs to be fixed? At the bilateral level, I would propose a more regular informal and formal dialogues at all levels in the area of diplomacy, economic, trade, and security. In fact, the fact that we are having this exercise today demonstrates that most of the dialogues can be done electronically, and we can it can be much less of a burden on time, on resources on both sides. Such dialogues will help enhance understanding and information sharing between the two sides, which I believe can lead towards the drawing up of a joint strategy and roadmap on how we should proceed to achieve our common goals. On the regional front, the dialogues between the two countries should be frank and forthcoming, focusing on the concerns and how to address them. In this way, the two sides will be able to gradually articulate and crystallize their ideas in a very specific and practical manner, leaving no room for speculations or guesswork. Eventually, it is hoped that the workable joint solutions can be found for most of the issues. So what's new about all this? Aside from having regular formal and informal bilateral dialogues at all levels, new ideas and approaches also should be jointly developed. This would mean addressing issues which are not directly security and military focused, but with strong and military and security implications. Mention has been made about new global challenges that would impact the region, such as illegal migration, transnational crime, the environment, global infrastructure and supply chain. I am confident that through serious brainstorming, viable solutions can be found for some of such key issues. For instance, for the concern over the environmental situation in the Mekong area, I am now working on a project which would help to introduce voluntary carbon market to countries in the region. None existed at the moment. It is hoped that if successful, the initiative will be able to reduce deforestation and land grab in the region and encourage local farmers and villagers to practice sustainable and environmentally friendly farming, simply because they will be able to package their achievements in the efforts to reduce greenhouse gases and sell them into the global market as carbon credits. which this year the price can be as high as $50 per ton. An initiative such as this very well could be included in the frameworks of the Mekong-US partnership or the Irrawaddy Chao Phraya Mekong Economic Cooperation Strategy, or ACMEX, or even the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. Cybersecurity is another area where the sharing of knowledge and information would benefit all countries in the region. In 2019, the Thai Foreign Ministry has already taken the first step on this initiative by organizing the first international conference on cybersecurity implications on peace and security in the ASEAN region. The interest and attention received by this conference was overwhelming, with key tech companies from the US such as Microsoft, Cisco, Palo Alto, and Symantec playing a prominent role alongside government cybersecurity experts from Australia, Canada, and Thailand, to name a few. The summary of the conference can be found on the Thai Foreign Ministry's website. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the second conference has to be postponed. Last but not least, another one of my most favorite examples of projects is the U.S. Thailand cooperation through the Armed Forces Research Institute for Medical Science, or AFRIMS. While through the decades, AFRIMS has made notable achievements in the area of medicine, especially efforts to eradicate malaria, many of you may know that AFRIMS plays a far more significant role beyond that, especially in the area of DNA research. As we speak, among other things, AFRIMS is also working on vaccines for the treatment of COVID-19. The key message from the example of projects that I have outlined is this. In order to work together in an alliance to address issues of concern or come up with practical solutions for bilateral or regional issues in an alliance, the efforts can be collaborative rather than confrontational or having to choose between either your way or my way. The new global challenges and issues of concern for Thailand and Southeast Asia are many. The US and Thailand alliance can work together to address the key ones and find novel and creative solutions to address them. Instead of looking for the negatives and differences, we should look for commonalities and shared interests. By saying this, I'm not proposing that we try to gloss over the key differences and disagreements between the US and Thailand. Rather, I'm saying that we should discuss and communicate more often and listen to each other more often and start by working on quick wins. We will eventually have a strong foundation to address tougher issues in the future. In conclusion, I simply want to close by saying that through the years, we have built a very solid foundation for the US-Thailand alliance. Reference has been made to the many cooperation frameworks between the US and Thailand. They are all good building blocks for the future of US-Thailand alliance. However, as I have mentioned earlier, in order for the alliance to remain relevant and viable, the two countries must work together to focus on what they want the future of the alliance to look like and come up with a strategy and roadmap to realize such visions and goals. Along the way, creative and innovative ideas and a much wider perspective on issues of interest must be part and parcel of the process. We cannot simply continue to do things in the same way if we expect to achieve a more rewarding outcome than in the past. I believe this is probably the best way that we can put all such events and activities into context, capitalize on the ones we are doing well and improve on what needs to be improved, and even abandon the ones that may be yielding not enough results compared to the time and efforts that we put in. The responsibility lies on both countries to ensure that they bring value to the table in whatever they think or do, and that they have realistic expectations of one another. If Thailand says that it is of important geostrategic value to the US, it will have to be able to elaborate and demonstrate how so. If the US says that she values the strategic partnership between the two countries, perhaps time and increased communication are what is needed from the US. It is only through the re-examination and recalibration of the U.S. Thailand alliance, together with the injection of new thinking and openness, that we can take full advantage of the new opportunities for the U.S. Thailand alliance. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Dr. Sakuntha, thank you so much indeed for that very eloquent statement and some concrete ideas there for to push forward. But in the interest of time and the fact that questions are beginning to emerge in the Q&A section of the Zoom call, let me turn immediately over to Senator Gardner for his remarks. Senator.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sathu, and thank you to the other distinguished guests and panelists. Ambassador, thank you very much for the invitation to participate. I'll keep my comments brief. The other comments have been very well said, and I hope that everyone has a chance to follow up with many of the observations and recommendations that have been made. Several years ago, the last Shangri-La dialogue that I attended prior to COVID, I stated this in my remarks at the Shangri-La Dialogue. The Indo-Pacific is home to 5 United States treaty allies. The Indo-Pacific is home to nearly half of the world's population and half of the world's economic activity. There is no conceivable scenario where the United States will be leaving the region. The United States is here to stay. It's a Pacific nation grounded in the rule of law, dedicated to global peace, prosperity, and security. And we will spare no effort to uphold the peaceful order that has benefited all nations in this region. And as you see the beginning of a Colorado sunrise, I think it shows the opportunities that we have to continue working with the U.S. Thailand relationship as the sun rises and becomes even brighter for the relationship between our two nations. Look, there's a couple quick points that I want to make. First of all, congratulations to Thailand and the recipient of a gold medal in Taekwondo. As a father with 3 children who are active in training in Taekwondo, I know how difficult this is. So congratulations to the people of Thailand for that hard-earned gold medal at the Olympics. The second thing, of course, is making sure that the United States maintains our presence. Our presence has ebbed and flowed in the Indo-Pacific, and it needs to increase and stay and maintain a permanency of higher and stronger presence. One of the first challenges that we have is making sure that we strengthen and secure our network of alliances in the Indo-Pacific, and Thailand is central to that. ASEAN centrality is so key to the work that we can do beyond that in maintaining this network of alliances and allies, and making sure that we are engaging in new investments and bringing new investors to Thailand and beyond. It's why I passed the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, which was focusing on 3 things: economic security, national security, and working with our partners like Thailand, our great and good friend, and making sure that we can continue working on economic openings to invest even further. The second element, of course, in long-term U.S. Success in the Indo-Pacific, and making sure that we strengthen those ties for success with Thailand, is to make sure that we have a broader concerted national effort, meeting the challenge here in the United States of enhancing our instruments of U.S. national power, which continues to be those tools provided through the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, continue to be those alliances that we have. And nothing has shown us the importance of allies more than the experience of the global pandemic that we have just gone through. And as I sit here and listen to Dr. Darb, I am thinking about the commission that we should establish post-pandemic to look at ways to further strengthen our relationships in a global pandemic. What works and didn't work for vaccines and distribution, what works and didn't work for supply chains and health equipment, to understand that we have a global view of what not to repeat and what we should implement immediately to have better results and save the lives of our mutual countries. There are other things that we can and will get into the question and answer session, but I would just say this, adding on to it, that we need to strengthen our relations, deepen investment in our two nations. We need to strengthen our security engagement with each other. We need to strengthen our people-to-people and leadership engagements with each other, including the highest visitation highest levels of visitation between our two countries, increase our our funding into infrastructure, and making sure that we're enhancing things in cybersecurity, as Dr. Darp mentioned, including the enactment of a cyber league of Indo-Pacific states, of which the United States can be a part of and help support financially. With that, I will turn it back to you as we get into questions from the panel, for the panel.
Thank you, Senator Gardner, and the two very important suggestions there about looking at successes and failures in response to the global pandemic, and also the Commission on Cybersecurity. I really, as always, with your work on ARIA and other elements, thank you so much. And as many of folks will know on this call, Secretary of Defense Austin gave this morning. I watched at 6 a.m. the Fullerton Dialogue speech on partnerships. So that provides a kind of framework for thinking about how we go forward in the U.S.-Thai alliance as well. So thank you, Senator Gardner. Let me turn over to Alex Feldman for some comments on the commercial elements. Many issues have come up with supply chain, et cetera. Alex, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sathu. I want to thank you and the East-West Center and Ambassador Masaviv and the Embassy for having us today. I'm very honored to serve on this distinguished panel and this distinguished morning on U.S.-Thai relations. But I think there is, I think we've heard it before, but I just want to say it in no uncertain terms. There is no more consequential region of the world than in the Indo-Pacific, as Senator Gardner just said, or I would argue ASEAN. As Sathu alluded to, we launched ASEAN Matters for America last week. I hope you'll all take a look at it. It is in the chat box. You can take a look at the details. But you know, Thailand sits at the heart of ASEAN. Thailand was the actual birthplace of ASEAN on August 8th, 1967, and Thailand is critical to the region as a whole, as ASEAN as a whole, and also the Indo-Pacific. So what we do in Thailand has reverberations across the most consequential region of the world for the United States, bar none, on all matters, but especially economic matters. Just to give you a little bit of sense, ASEAN is the third largest population in the world, and it sits nestled next to the first and second largest populations in the world. So in terms of a market, there is no bigger market than the Indo-Pacific, ASEAN, and again, Thailand sits at its heart. ASEAN also is our fourth largest export market and #1 destination for American foreign direct investment. The U.S.-Thai, I'm going to keep my remarks relatively short because I'm watching time, but I do want to cover two issues, trade and supply chains. And the U.S.-Thai trade relationship is robust. Thailand is the second largest economy in ASEAN, so it's no accident that that is the case. But we had, even during COVID, we had $49 billion in two-way trade, including $11 billion of American exports to Thailand, even in the midst of COVID. And we heard earlier from Deputy Minister, Vice Minister Vijayawat, that Thailand was able to keep open factories in Thailand throughout the pandemic, and that enabled supply chains, which we'll get to in a little bit. But trade is not standing still, and unfortunately, the United States needs to get back in the game. But Thailand has been moving forward and specifically signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, which brings together 15 nations and brings companies that are invested in Thailand access to some of the most important markets in the world, which include Japan, China, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, among others, including as well. So we are very excited about the opportunities for RCEP, and I want to congratulate the Royal Thai government. Not only did they sign it with the other 15 signatories last year, but they also were one of the first to complete its national ratification process, created a fund to support Thai companies when RCEP goes into effect, hopefully in the fourth quarter of this year. But Thailand can do more, and I hope it will do more. And certainly the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific, or CPTPP, which unfortunately does not at the moment include the United States, is an opportunity for Thailand. Again, American companies investing in Thailand have the opportunity to engage markets and serve markets based on Thailand's own trade policy. So I would encourage Prime Minister Prayut and the Royal Thai government to continue their efforts to explore this important agreement. But you can do even more. Obviously, some of your competitors in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, to be honest, has incredible trade agreement matrix that includes the European Union as well. So I'd argue that Thailand should think about an EU agreement, as Indonesia is doing as well. But I would also say that the digital economy offers a tremendous opportunity, as we've all seen with the pandemic. And digital economy agreements led by, at this point, Singapore, offer another avenue for Thailand to strengthen its economic ties to other partners in ASEAN and the world, and offer opportunities for American business. I could go on, but I'll stop there on the economic side. I will say that Thailand is hosting APEC next year. And as a result of hosting APEC, you've got a great opportunity to use that platform to showcase Thailand and to advance issues, including issues around the digital economy. The supply chain has also been in the news as of late. Senator Gardner made reference to it, as did others. And it is truly an opportunity for Thailand. As America looks for trusted partners, reliable supply chains, you've proven in Thailand that that Thailand will stand by its investors and will do everything it can, even in the face of health challenges, to keep factories open, keeping the health of their factory workers safe, but at the same time, keeping those supply chains open and responsive to the world. And that is a huge opportunity as America looks beyond China and looks to make sure that it has redundant supply chain, something we found to our surprise, that many nodes of the supply chain globally have only one point of failure. And that obviously is something we're going to be changing in the American business community going forward, and offers Thailand tremendous opportunity. Sathu, I could go on and on and on, but I know we're running out of time, so I want to stop there and maybe get a question in.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you for pointing out, of course, that Thailand will be hosting next year APEC. I think that's an important opportunity to flag Thailand's place in the region, but also specifically in the U.S. Thai context. Look, we have, as always, with an embarrassment of riches of such distinguished and knowledgeable folks who have spoken: Senator Gardner, Dr. Sukuntasap, Alex, Ambassador Manasvi, Vice Minister Vijava, and of course, Senator Duckworth, amongst others. Limited time for Q&A. I'm going to use the moderator's prerogative to issue to this panel kind of combined questions. We have 6 already in the Q&A. So let me combine them and ask you to make the following remarks, if you would, please. First, could you say something about why the U.S.-Thai alliance is still compelling and should be seen as compelling, not only by the two countries themselves, because that's kind of work they do bilaterally, use of UDAPAO, the exercises, the military hardware sales, the cooperation in military medicine, all of those kind of things that we all know so well on this call. But what's the case for it in the region? Why is it important? So that's the first question. Why don't we take that, and I'll pose the second question as I consolidate the Q&A. Could we open up with very briefly, Dr. Sukuntasap, maybe just some quick comments why this alliance still matters? As you know, as I mentioned, Secretary Austin is in the region today.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Lim. As I mentioned in my statement, the famous claim that Thailand has about its importance in the region, especially for the U.S. Thailand Strategic Alliance, is the geostrategic position that the country lies. And because of this, I believe whether you go down south, or you go up north, or you go east, or you go west, Thailand will always be in the middle. And because of that, we will continue to remain important as a geostrategic partner. Thank you.
Dr. Sukuntasap, may I follow up and ask you, do you think Secretary Austin should have stopped in Thailand? He is visiting, as you well know, Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines, perhaps on a future trip if he doesn't have time on this trip.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for asking that. As I also said, that more communication, allocating more time, that is something that we mostly want from the U.S. I think the days of asking for favors and asking for financial support and other resources, they're outdated. What we need more from the U.S. at this point would be to communicate more with us, allocate more time to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Gardner, may I turn to you, sir, for comments on the alliance?
No, thank you. And I do think that the world has been improved and enhanced because of the relationship between the United States and Thailand. The United States has a great affinity for the country, for the people of Thailand. We're made better by those who live in the United States, who come from or have heritage that we share together and the common values. Look, whether it's a CDC partnership over the Zika virus or the work that we can do over COVID-19, the work that we can do to address environmental challenges that we face as a globe. Those are all things that need U.S. Thailand leadership. I remember the first visit I had to Thailand, where we were in northern Thailand, and then we traveled to Bangkok, and the interactions we had with the business leaders in Thailand and the desire to drive further investments. Look, when you engage with people, when you invest in people, when you invest in nations, you do everything you can to look out for that, to build that stronger, to make sure that those relationships don't fray, to make sure that you can come closer in values, to become closer in shared ties. And that means that we can, that means that when we do that, we strengthen the regional partnership between the U.S. and the Indo-Pacific, particularly Southeast Asia. And it is an area that faces multiple challenges, whether it's the challenge of the neighbor of Myanmar and the atrocities that have taken place there, whether it's the challenge of trade and perhaps aggressiveness and claims in trade lanes that are challenged regionally. It's security and terrorist issues that we have to address throughout the globe. And that's why the U.S.-Thailand relationship matters, to address those items. A stronger U.S.-Thailand is a stronger world.
Thank you so much, Senator Gardner, for that statement. Alex, any thoughts on the alliance, particularly how getting Thailand engaged, not just militarily, but in the larger order building, economic order building project that's so critical to maintaining future growth and prosperity in the region?
Thank you, Sathu. It's always hard to come after such distinguished speakers and come in the last position, but there's clearly a very important role for Thailand and the United States and the alliance in the greater ASEAN and Indo-Pacific focal points. And my colleagues have made those points clear, but I would just sum it up in stability. That stability is manifest through the military relationship, and JustMac, Cobra Gold, and the other very visible demonstrations of American-Thai alliance, as well as the cooperation on healthcare. There's no better health partner in Southeast Asia than Thailand, and there's a tremendous amount, as my colleagues have already said. But once upon a time, Lee Kuan Yew and I had a chance to spend a few seconds together. He told me one thing that I'll never forget, and that is, in Asia, trade is strategy. And the important economic relationship between Thailand and the United States is critical to our going forward. Lots of opportunity for strengthening it, but it is coming from a strong base. And certainly American presence, investments in Thailand, in the Eastern Economic Corridor, are strong, and we hope they will become stronger. And that will be the bedrock for growth throughout the region. So, obviously geographically, Thailand's well situated, but I think it's more than that. And the stability that this alliance brings is critical to the region. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I mean, I think it's a good reminder to folks listening. We have almost 150 people online. is that, if you look at the numbers, it's really quite extraordinary through the waxing and waning of the U.S.-Thai relations. Thailand's importance to U.S. economic engagement in Southeast Asia, and particularly mainland Southeast Asia, both FDI and trade, is astounding. There's been a major production base of hundreds of U.S. companies. And I think that in the future, one element of security that we talk about the U.S.-Thai alliance, not just military security, traditional hardware, but security of supply chains, risk resilience, diversification is going to be more important, not less, including in specifically the military supply chain. You've seen what Congress has said recently to the Department of Defense about securing supply chains on the military side as well. And there are many ways we can explore that with the U.S.-Thai relationship. Look, we are almost 7 minutes over, and I want to be mindful of the distinguished members, Vice Minister, Ambassador Manasvi, Senator Gardner, Dr. Sukantasap, and others, and their schedules. I know Alex has to run too, but I want to close by saying this. This is a wonderful start to a series of webinars on looking at new opportunities and new directions in the U.S.-Thai alliance. I am very grateful to the Royal Thai Embassy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their cooperation with the East-West Center on this effort. The East-West Center, as many of you know, was authorized by Congress to promote better understanding and relations between the peoples and governments of the United States and Asia. And through such programs, we're doing precisely this. And East-West Center has a long and distinguished record of working with Thai academics, government officials, scholars, experts, artists. We've had your royal family graciously visit, and there is a very famous Thai pavilion located at our campus in Honolulu. So the relationship with Thailand for the East-West Center is critical, and we're very grateful to participate. So stay tuned for the future webinars series. There will also be a series of analyses published and a 1.5 track dialogue task force on the U.S.-Thai relationship. So with that, let me say thank you to everyone. Let me invite all of you to join us next time. Good night for those of you joining us from Bangkok and Southeast Asia. I know it's late and you want to get on to your evening. And good day to everyone here in the United States. Thank you so much and see you next time. Bye-bye now.